Now, as I just prayed and thought, God, it wasn't my life journey. What he wanted was for you to see Jesus. So what I'm doing is picking out times that God has moved sovereignly in my life. Because, one of the things that he did, I'll explain it too. As a young teenager, I was out swimming with a cousin doing laps. We were in a pool in a river and we're just swimming laps for the fun of it. And I came up to the edge of the end of the lap, put my heads down like this on the plank of wood that floated up and down. Well, the pier was about 8 foot above me and I was just exhausted from doing so many laps. So I just rested. Well, the kids at the top were fooling around and all of a sudden one of them was pushed or jumped. I do not know, but he landed his feet into my head. It took off a lot of skin on my face, on the plank, broke teeth, made a mess. But I sank. He knocked me out. And my cousin, even though we were young, had the sense to pull me out. And I look back and I see Satan. God was in control, you weren't.
Exactly. That's right.
And another one that when I was a teenager, I was given a medical verdict. I don't know whether you're all aware that I struggle medically. I was given a medical verdict when I was in my teens that I would not live past 34 or 35 because they couldn't rectify what was going wrong. Exodus 22, chapter 20, verse 12, and Ephesians 6, verse 2. Honour your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. I'm turning 80 this year. My sister chose not to honour my parents. She abandoned them, but she died of cancer in the 50s. And I'm 80. And I've lived my life with a medical problem that God has chosen not to heal, no matter how many times I've cried out. And I've sought God many times for healing. And he has chosen to let me live with a thorn in my flesh. A very annoying one. And another one from my teens in high school. I did year 11 and 12 in a steel brace. They found a disease in my spine, and the steel brace started here and finished down either side of my spine and around my hips, and all leather straps to hold it in place and keep me upright. That was year 11 and 12 for me. And it just was God's keeping power in the fact that I got through school. I passed my HSC, got every subject. And the first 6 months of year 11, I was home flat in a bed. And once they gave me the brace, then I got back and I did year 11 or 12 and 18 months. God was very gracious. I had a very godly mum too, which is a help. One of the things I've really come to know is Satan wants to do me in, but God will use it for good. And the witness that I've been able to be to other people for some of the things in my journey, it's gorgeous. And I've got 2 people on Messenger at the moment. They're friends of my kids, so they're my younger generation. We communicate daily. And one of them, a couple of months back, opened up about her childhood and what her father had done, including getting a knife out of the kitchen and holding it to her throat. She's never ever shared it outside. It was the first time. And I thought, God, you've used my journey for good. And just, I can bring her peace and bring her the word. But yeah, go back to when I was first married to the birth father of my 3 girls. On our honeymoon, I knew something was terribly wrong. And I came home and cried out to my mum and said, something's really wrong here. God gave me 3 precious girls. And I was told I'd never have children because of my body, that I'd never fall pregnant and carry children. And I carried 3 children to full term, natural births.
Wow.
Yeah. Each one was a miracle from God for me, and I just consecrated them to him. And it's amazing, Elizabeth, my eldest, was born to her name of Karen Leanne. Husband named her. But when we got through all the court hearings, she came to me and she said, Mum, I want to change my name. And we ended up with Elizabeth. You know what it means? Consecrated to God.
Yeah.
Which is what I'd done with them when she was tiny. It's many years. We lived in a wrong atmosphere in the home. The kids were in their late teens, and we spent many hours sitting in a courtroom, and eventually one time sitting waiting for justice. And God spoke for me very clearly. He said, you teach your children there is no justice on this earth for what had been done. No justice. But God would deal with him. God will deal with the justice. And it's beautiful, the peace that I can walk in, because the confidence is in the word. And as I've gone through tough stuff, I've got stronger. Yeah, when the judge spoke, the sentence was only 3.5 years, and his own barrister thought he was going to get 8. But even 8 wasn't justice for 18 years of what he did. When the girls were in school, my ex decided he was no longer going to pay school fees. And they were in a Christian school, and we had to cut it fine, we were doing it. And I had to go to the school pastor and explain to him his choice. And I'd have to draw the girls out of the school because I said, there's no way I can pay the school fees. The response from the pastor was, God placed the girls here. They can stay right through to year 12, all 3 of them. And I worked 2 days in the library volunteering in the back room of the library. I eventually got a job working in the library for 2 days. Then I was doing 2 days working, and I kept up the volunteer days. In my heart, I was covering what was given to us, but I just saw God's hand, because in the latter years of high school, we're all caught here. The kids were surrounded by godly teachers. Ruth reckons she can remember one teacher, and he said, I know he was praying for me. He just didn't identify her in the classroom, but prayed for her. And all the teachers surrounded our family in prayer. What God did in giving us the schooling protected my girls in those latter years. As I was rejoicing in God's protection and provision, I didn't realise how the staff in later years prayed for my girls, loved them and watched over them. As we managed many court hearings for their father, Ruth was very aware of the teacher praying over her. With the court hearings, I had 3 very wounded girls, very wounded. The realisation of what their father had done. In my 30s, some serious surgery went wrong, and I was shipped from the private hospital into a city hospital because it was emergency care, and it was life-threatening. The ambulance was under lights and sirens, but all I can remember is how rough it was when an ambulance drives over the island in the middle and over train tracks. Because I was only a couple of days out of big surgery, like I'm talking a scar this long. But what had happened was gangrene was growing. The hospital, I don't know which one it was that I went to, I cannot remember. I can't ask Mum anymore. But they set me up with saline draining in this end of the wound and flowing out the other side. They just continually flushed it for weeks on end. And I can remember one session, I got the giggles with the nurses trying to get it because I ended up in a puddle in the bed. Something came unplugged. But the nursing sisters were gorgeous because the smell was vile. You know what gangrene will smell like. And my mum, in this private hospital, then the public hospital I got sent to, John didn't be there, but my mum and dad did. And I can still see, I was in the bed up in this corner, and in my head I can still see my mum at the windows pacing up and down. Psalm 118 verse 7. She shall not die but live and declare the glorious works of the Lord. And so her life is safe, and she will live and tell what the Lord has done. She shall not die. What I'm doing today, what God showed me to do, was to tell you the works. They started treatment, and once I started to respond and woke out of the anaesthetic, they sent me back to the first hospital. It took 3 months. And my mum looked after my 3 girls, but it was 3 months back in hospital. One of the nursing sisters that was doing the treatment came in one day and she shut the door, a bedroom door as she came in. I was used to it being shut, I didn't mind. And she said, I've come at the risk of my job. Nobody must find out what I'm doing. And she promptly started to tell me, your husband needs to go and change your doctor. Otherwise you will go out of here in a wooden box. And she put a job on the line. And I think, God, you are so gracious. My husband couldn't do it. My father did. My father took my husband and fronted up and did it. He was angry. His daughter, my other daughter had abandoned them. So I was all they had. He succeeded in changing it. But one of the things I call this funny, the smell was horrific. and they would keep the door shut because the smell would go down the hall and distress everybody. But the staff in the kitchen would draw lots on who was going to take my lunch to me. That's how bad it was.
Throw it through the door.
I look back, it's done me good looking back like this,
Yeah.
because I tend to shut it off because there's so much horrible stuff. But I just so see God in so much of it. They were trying to work on my gut and my stomach, had me open, and the surgeon had a habit. He said, whenever I have somebody open, I put my hand into their gut and pat around and make sure everything's all right. Well, he found bowel cancer. So I went from one major surgery on my stomach. 10 days later, the operation to take out 12 inches was the length of a school ruler of my large bowel. And God's graciousness, the cancer was totally encased in that piece of bowel. They removed the 12 inches of the bowel and didn't even require treatment. Now, had we not gone for the repair on the stomach, had we not had the surgeon who paddled around, it's a silent killer. And I just, that's 91, so what are we, 30 years ago? Yeah. When I was about 20 odd years, and he got a diagnosis of dementia, and I ended up as full-time carer. When I needed a break, he refused to go into respite. He was fine, he didn't need respite. But if you want funny stories, I can tell you funny stories. Because journey with dementia, you get bizarre things happening. I've got one really funny one. We had a swimming pool at the time. We were living, Ruth and family upstairs, Jeff and I self-contained downstairs. Well, Jeff decided the pool wasn't the right colour blue. He went off and bought poster paint, the colour he wanted, and tipped it into the pool. I tell you. It's really funny because he's gone into a village now, and people say, look, how come he can look after himself in the village? I said, he doesn't have a garage, he doesn't have tools, he can't get into things that are locked up. Like, my son-in-law used to lock the little shed with the pump in it, and he'd come home and find it all been shut. Jeff would get the lock undone and change all the timings on the pump and things like that. Or when he put the poster paint in, he put the pump on to pump the water to mix it up properly. We had to ban the kids from the pool.
How did you clean that up?
Wow.
How did you clean that up? the pool?
We allowed the filter to do it. Daryl just ran the filter until we got rid of the paint through the filter. I don't know whether it ever ruined the filter. It could have. But yeah. I just think that one's one of the really fun.
Oh boy.
When I needed a break, he refused to go into respite. And I had to ring his son and say, Stephen, I need help. I need a break. I was physically sick and I was exhausted from being a full-time carer. And I needed that break. Well, Stephen came and got him, and he went with Stephen and went and stayed with one of his sons. He refused to go into respite to give me a break. And a week after, he came back. His son rang me. He said his dad's going to come back for all his things. He came back for all his things and never came back. Made the decision he wasn't coming back, that I was trying to steal his money, and they were all...
Yeah.
But it absolutely broke me. He was the love of my life. We had a beautiful relationship. We ran a business together, and even with the dementia, he was happy to let me take the strain of things had to be done. It was a problem in the car. He would send me up wrong roads into traffic, and he used to drive straight over the circular ones. Instead of going round the roundabout, he would drive straight over the top. When the specialist said it was time to give up his licence, I just quietly nodded in the background. But he lost, of all the things they tested, one thing went plummeting. And I just was thinking, God, you are so gracious, because I needed him to stop driving. But the thing that plummeted was his ability to make decisions. He would hear information, but the ability to make decisions just plummeted. And yeah, I was grateful for that one. But the second week that he came, he got all his stuff and he came back to the door, our outside door, and he's standing there yelling at me. And that's not the relationship we had.
Yeah.
Once he made the decision to leave,
Yeah.
different man.
Yep.
But it's clear as a bell, as he's standing there, God just spoke into my spirit, it is done.
Mm.
And I had to come to terms with the fact he was saying it and yeah.
Was it the same person?
He had become very controlling because when you're caring for dementia people, quite often they teach in the teaching you get, they say don't argue because they'll hear the argument, remember the crossness, but they won't remember why.
Yeah.
All you get left with is the agitation, and that's not healthy. Well, he was only supposed to live 5 to 7 years. When I left, I'd been doing it for about 15.
Damn.
Yeah. And I had literally created a bully because I applied that. And I was just accommodating him. And yeah, I literally, he was just trying to take control. But I was broken. I learnt in that time the father, the body, having a spirit and it being a separate part of me because I knew God wasn't going to leave me. It was so strong that I just had to walk this. But over here, I was so broken. I couldn't talk to people. I just sobbed and cried. But this is where I learned. Somebody taught me how to YouTube on my tablet. And I found Joyce Meyer. And it was the start of feeding me out of YouTube. Because for a while there, I didn't have a church. Because Jeffrey was so entrenched in the church where he was, and he had lots of little jobs that he was doing, I said to the pastor, I will step away, even though Jeffrey's made the choices, I will step away from that church. Well, for quite some time, I had no church until people reached out and drew me into another church. It was hard. I actually had to get a friend to walk with me. I walk into the foyer of the church, I can't do that, and walk back out again. My little car went into the car park and out of the car park many times. But yeah, I was ashamed, I was embarrassed, and I felt I'd failed God as a wife. And I had to deal with that. One of the things that happened was the whole deal, I ended up with this gut. It was like a rock in my belly. And I knew there was a scream attached to it. And I put up with it for a while. And I thought, I've got to deal with this. Because I knew spiritually you have to voice wrong spiritual stuff sometimes to get it out. So I decided I'd go on, the car was in the garage. So I didn't want to disturb the neighbours. I thought we'd end up with the police. So I went and shut myself into the car. I took a pillow with me so that if I could scream into the pillow and the neighbours wouldn't know. Put the tape on, praise and worship. And I just really got to see this scream and just give forth this scream into the pillow. And I left the worship tape on and just God spoke to me out of some of the songs because I am a worshipper. I used to have a lovely singing voice, but it's something I've lost in the journey. But yeah, the thing that stopped me, I just stayed with God, was all of a sudden the CD player wouldn't work. I discovered I'd flattened the battery on the car.
You'd what?
Flattened the battery on the car. I tell you, but the episode in the garage was just so good because I mean, never had it back. But again, so aware of the spirit in me and the physical in me and the separateness of it. I've never been so aware of how separate they were. And it worried me for a while because until somebody helped me. Another one that's really precious, and this is especially for grandparents. One of my girls, broken marriage, turned up on our doorstep with her and her 2-year-old son and told me what she'd done. And I went into Jeff and said, we talked. He said, she comes home. So we had this daughter and a little 2-year-old boy in the garage underneath. Well, Mum was so distressed with her journey, the little one would get distressed and she couldn't cope with him. She just couldn't. So she'd call me down and I would just nurse him And she didn't ask me to do anything. I just needed to pick up where she couldn't. And I would pray in tongues over him and just quietly pray in the Spirit. And many, many, many times this would happen in her journey. And I'd eventually put him down to sleep, but I would just pray in tongues over him, very quietly, wasn't loud. And it took her ages because she knew I was praying over him, but didn't understand what I had done. But he knew the power of the Holy Spirit. He was 2 years old, and he'd just keep asking for Nana pray until we worked out what we were up to. Well, when Jeff made his choices, it was just before Christmas, and my first Christmas was tough. I was in a messed state, broken, and the kids were having Christmas upstairs, and they said, "Come up and join in, Mum." I said, "No, Christmas is for the kids. I won't get through it without getting distressed. They don't need to see that. Just leave me down here." Well, that son, her son, my grandson, came down to visit and find me. And he found me curled up in bed, just praying and worshipping. He lay down on the bed beside me and just hugged me and prayed. It burst.
How old was he?
He was about 21 at the time. Yeah.
Mm.
The young man went through Bible college, trained to be a counsellor, and is now working, helping teenage kids. And Spirit-filled, working in churches, working with young folk. And I think, again, God, you are so gracious. That broken home and the mess that they went through, and here's this man on fire for God. And the other child in that family is little Lachlan, our foster boy. And he's got so many problems, but he's so on fire for God. He's 14. And I just rejoice because broken marriage, but the power of prayer of grandparents, the love and the power of prayer, it just is so good.